Good morning, students. Today we are going to discuss about 8th standard social science history unit 1 urban changes during the British period. Urban changes during the British period, that is a heading of this lesson. First, learning objectives. First point, understand the growth and development of towns in ancient and medieval periods. Second, analyze the nature and features of urbanization under the British period. Third, learn about the emergence of new urban centers such as cantonments, hill stations, and port cities. Fourth one, trace the origin and the growth of Madras, that means Chennai. So, these are the important topics we are going to discuss in this lesson. Okay. First one, introduction. The evolution of towns. Evolution means development. The evolution of towns, urban settlements has occurred in different ways and in different stages. Towns flourished since prehistoric times in India. Towns in India can be classified into three types. One is ancient towns, medieval towns, and modern towns. Towns are classified three types in India. One is ancient towns, medieval towns, and modern towns. So, three types of town system in those days in India. Now we are going to discuss one by one. First one is ancient towns. In ancient times, towns emerged in and around of residential place of kings and its location easily accessible to sea and rivers for trade. In those days, that place for used for trade and commerce. Most of them developed as administrative, religions, and cultural city centers. So that places were used for administrative purpose, religions, and cultural centers. Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Varanasi, Ahmedabad, and Madurai are well-known ancient towns. So these were the well-known ancient towns. What were they? Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Varanasi, Ahmedabad, and Madurai are well-known ancient towns. Okay. Okay. Next, we are going to discuss about medieval towns. Medieval towns. During medieval times, medieval means center. During medieval times, most of the towns developed as headquarters of principalities. Principalities means rule of princes, principalities and kingdoms. They functioned either fort city or port city. Fort city or port. Port means harbor city. Important among them are Delhi, Hyderabad, Jaipur, Lucknow, Agra, and Nagpur. So these were the important cities in medieval towns. What were they? Delhi, Hyderabad, Jaipur, Lucknow, Agra, and Nagpur. So these were the important cities in medieval towns. Okay. Okay. Now we are going to discuss about modern towns. Modern means recent. Modern towns. With the arrival of Europeans, brought about new changes in the development of towns. So after the arrival of Europeans in India, the towns were changed into modern level. They first developed some coastal towns such as Surat, Daman, Goa, and Pondicherry. For what? They want to develop their trade and commerce purpose. That's why they want to develop some coastal towns such as Surat, Daman, Goa, and Pondicherry. The British, after consolidated their power in India, developed three main cities. What were they? Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata as administrative headquarters and trading centers. So, after that, the three important places were developed as headquarters and trading centers. What were they? Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata. Next one, with the extension of domination, they developed new towns depending on its location, purpose, and resources. The newly developed towns are known differently as hill towns, industrial towns, court towns, railway station towns, cantonment, and administrative towns. The towns were classified in different types. One is hills towns, industrial towns, court towns, railway station towns, cantonments, and administrative towns. So these were the different types of town system in India during the time of British period. Okay, next topic is unique features of urbanization under the British period. Unique features, that is special features of urbanization under the British period. First one, deindustrialization. Deindustrialization, that is disappearance of industries. In the beginning of 18th century, the policies of the British proved harmful to the process of urbanization. Later, the economic policies followed by the British led to the rapid transformation of India's economy into a colonial economy and development of cities. Next, with the help of one-way free trade, that was a very important one. One-way free trade, predominance of British Indian manufacturing industries were destroyed. The Indian manufacturing industries were destroyed by the help of one-way free trade policy introduced by British in India. The effect of the wholesale destruction of the Indian manufacturing industries led to the ruin of millions of artisans and craftsmen. That was a great drawback to the artisans and craftsmen by the introduction of British in the new policy of free trade. Next, there was a sudden collapse of the urban handicraft industry, which had for centuries made India's name in the markets of the entire civilized world. So, after the arrival of British policy, that means help of one-way free trade, that was totally collapsed the life of artisans and craftsmen in India. So, the local or native industries were totally disappear. Towns and cities, long famed for their specialized products, caused a continually shrinking market. As a result, old populous manufacturing towns such as Dhaka, Murshidabad, Surat, and Lucknow lost their previous importance. So, after the arrival of new policies, the old manufacturing places were disappeared and lost their importance. The entire industrial structure crashed down under stiff competition of imported goods. The competition between the old goods and the imported goods. Next, the traditional industrial base of Indian cities made by the indigenous handicraft production was destroyed by industrial revolution. So after industrial revolution, the indigenous means native, local handicraft production was totally destroyed. The high import duties and other restrictions imposed on the import of Indian goods into British and Europe led to the decline of Indian industries. Thus, India became the agricultural colony of Britain. So, after there were lot of restrictions imposed by the British in the import of Indian goods into the Britain and Europe. So that's why India became the agricultural colony of British. Okay, next topic is deurbanization. Next topic is deurbanization. The transformation means changes. The transformation of India's economy into a colonial one, a market for the manufacturers and a source for the supply of raw materials to her industries, hit hard the industrial and the commercial base of the number of towns. The gradual erosion of king's power led to the demise of towns associated with their rule. Agra, once an imperial city in the first quarter of 19th century, was surrounded by extensive ruins all around. The native rulers lost their kingdom to the British by means of various policies of the colonial power. So that means totally the Indian rulers were also lost their power and lost their territories to the British. First, the Indian or native industries were disappear. Second, the native rulers and powers of the native rulers were disappear. Third one, another factor which contributed to the decline of urban centers of the pre-British period was the introduction of the network of railroad in India since 1853. So that was another cause for the decline of the Indian status. The introduction of railways resulted in the diversion of trade routes, and every railway station became a point of export of raw materials. The railways enabled British manufacturers to reach every nook and corner. That means part of each and every part of the country, and uprooted the traditional industries in the villages of the country. So that was a turning point in the trade and commerce of India during the time of British rule. Okay students, next the growth of new urban centers. The growth of new urban centers. British developed new centers of trade like Calcutta, Madras and Bombay on the eastern and western coastal areas. So these were the three important trade centers in India. That was Calcutta, Madras and Bombay. Next, Madras in 1639, Bombay in 1661 and Calcutta in 1690. Cities which the British largely created and fortified. All these were earlier fishing and weaving villages. So these places were only for fishing and weaving villages. Here they built their homes, shops and churches as well as their commercial and administrative headquarters. After slow by slow, that three important centers were developed for homes, shops and churches as well as their commercial and administrative headquarters. From the mid 18th century, there was a new phase of changes. The new changes was happen as the British gradually acquired political control after Battle of Plassey in 1759. That was a turning point in the Indian history. Battle of Plassey in 1759 and the trade of English East India Company expanded. In the late 18th century, Calcutta, Bombay and Madras rose in predominance as presidency cities. For administrative purpose, colonial India was divided into three presidencies under the British rule. Next, a new trend of urbanization began in the latter half of the 19th century as a result of the opening of Suez Canal, introduction of steam navigation, construction of railways, canals, harbors, growth of factory industries, coal mining, tea plantation, banking, shipping and insurance. So these were the new trend of urbanization began in the latter half of 19th century. Changes in the networks of trade were reflected in the development of urban centers. So what were the steps taken by the British government that was reflected in the development of urban centers? So next, port cities. Next, port cities. The British arrived in India for trading. That was the main purpose of British in first. The trading was the main motive of British in first. Madras, Calcutta and Bombay became the important ports. These were the important ports of the British in India. They played important role in trade. These cities became the prominent commercial areas with tall European styled buildings. The English East India Company built its factories and fortified them for the protection of their settlements. That was very important one. What was that? Protection. Fort St. George in Madras and Fort St. William in Calcutta were the best examples for the fortified cities, example for the trading centers. So next, second one, cantonment towns. Second one, cantonment town. That means the residents of army people. The residents of army people. The British occupied the Indian territory and political power by their military force. Totally, Indian territories and political power were captured by British through military force. So they needed strong military camps and established the cantonments. That's why they established the cantonments for their strong military camp. The cantonments were thus an earlier new kind of urban centers. Army people began to live in these places and gradually they were grown up as city. For example, Kanpur and Lahore, these were the important cantonment towns in those days during the time of British rule in India. Second one, hill stations. Second one, hill stations. Hill stations were distinctive, that means different features of colonial urban development. Although hill stations were not unknown prior to their founding by the British in India, after the arrival of British, the hill stations were very well known by the Indians. They were few and had a small population and were often visited for specific purpose. For example, Srinagar was a Mughal recreational center. Kedarnath and Badrinath were Hindu religious centers. The British, coming for a cool temperature climate, found the Indian summer season inhospitable. So, the cool climate of Indian hills was seen as productive and advantageous. So that was very easy and very favorable to the Europeans, especially the Britishers in India. It protect the Europeans from hot weather and epidemics. So they built up their alternative capitals in cool areas like Darjeeling was an alternative of Calcutta. Dehradun was the alternative of Delhi. So these were the places, the alternative places for the British during the time of winter. Hill stations became strategic places for billeting troops, guarding frontiers, and launching campaigns. Hill stations were developed both in North and South India. Example: Simla, Nainital, Darjeeling, Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand means Udagamandalam, and Kodaikanal. So these were the hill stations of Britishers in North and South. Simla was founded during the Gurkha War 1814 to 1816. Darjeeling was wrested from the rulers of Sikkim in 1835. These hill stations were also developed as sanatoriums, places for soldiers for rest and recovery from the illness. This introduction of railways made hill station more accessible. So, after the arrival of British in India, there were a lot of changes in the town system in India. Next one, railway towns. Next one, railway towns. Railway towns were also a type of urban settlements and were established in 1853 after the introduction of railways by the British. So that was the first railway line was introduced by the British in India during the time of 1853. Next time, by the nature of railway transport, all the towns were located on the plains. Examples: Chennai, Mumbai, and Calcutta. So these were the important railway station town or railway towns during the time of British. So these were the important three places: Chennai, Mumbai, Calcutta. That were the port city as well as the railway town cities in those days during the time of British rule in India. Okay, students, that's all. Remaining topics we will discuss in the next class. Thank you.